On today's episode of the Black Studies Podcast, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Crystal N. Feimster, Associate Professor of African American Studies and History and affiliated faculty in American Studies and Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Yale University. She also serves as the Harvey Goldblatt Head of Pearson College. A native of North Carolina, she is a historian of 19th and 20th century African American history, U.S. women's history, and the American South. Her scholarship examines racial and sexual violence, bridging social and political history to illuminate long obscure dimensions of the American past. Attentive to absences and asymmetries in the archive, she draws on gender studies, critical race theory, literary scholarship, and psychoanalysis to interpret some of the most elusive and traumatic facets of human experience. Professor Feimster earned her Ph.D. in history from Princeton University and her B.A. in history and women's studies from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She is the author of the prize-winning Southern Horrors, Women in the Politics of Rape and Lynching, recipient of the W.E.B. Du Bois Book Prize, and honorable mention for the Darlene Hine Book Prize. Her award-winning scholarship also includes the article, Keeping a Disorderly House in Civil War Kentucky, which received the Kentucky Historical Society's Collins Award for Best Article in the Register of the Kentucky Historical Society, and Rape and Mutiny at Fort Jackson, Black Laundresses Testify in Civil War Louisiana, which received honorable mention for the Letitia Woods Brown Article Prize from the Association of Black Women Historians. She has published widely in leading journals and has written essays for broader audiences in the New York Times, the Chronicle of Higher Education, and Slate. She is currently completing 2 books, Truth Be Told, The Battle for Freedom in Civil War-Era Louisiana, and Uncivil, Sex and Violence in the Civil War South. Her professional appointments reflect her leadership in the field. She is the president of the Southern Association of Women Historians, a member of the executive board of the Society of American Historians, associate editor of Civil War History, and contributing editor to Labor. She previously served as co-president of the Coordinating Council for Women in History and has held numerous leadership roles in national scholarly organizations. Her research has been supported by the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Institute for Advanced Study, and other distinguished institutions. A devoted and award-winning teacher, Professor Feimster offers well-subscribed courses on the long civil rights movement, African American women's history, critical race theory, and the women's liberation movement. In recognition of her commitment to undergraduate and graduate mentorship, she has received multiple honors, including the Pourvu Family Award for Interdisciplinary Teaching, the Yale Provost Teaching Prize, the Berkeley College Faculty Mentoring Prize, the Afro-American Cultural Center's Faculty Excellence Award in Teaching and Mentoring, and the Graduate Mentoring Award in the Humanities. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Black Studies Podcast. On today's episode, we have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Crystal N. Feimster, Associate Professor of African American Studies and History and affiliated faculty in American Studies and Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Yale University. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I mean, it's Black History Month, like I said, so they're keeping us busy. But happy to be able to do the work. So I'm good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We can dive in because I know it is a busy time. How did you get into Black Studies as a field, and what keeps you committed to doing that work?
That's a good question. So I was an undergraduate history and women's studies double major. I can't say that I had no history that counted for anything when I was in high school. Hopefully ain't nobody from high school listening. But nonetheless, I did not even imagine that I would do anything related to history. I think I thought I was going to do theater stuff. But I got to college, really found that I loved history, and the folks who were teaching me American history were scholars who were really invested in African American history specifically. So like when I took my first American history kind of survey class, which was like American history from, Civil War, Reconstruction to the present, really Vietnam at that point. I had Tara Hunter as my professor. And maybe I was a sophomore. So she really taught me my first American History Survey course. And without question, she taught it from the perspective of African Americans. And it wasn't an African American history survey from 1865 to the present. It was just American history. I think it was her first job. She had to teach that course, and she taught it, and I happened to be in it. And there were other folks there who I was taking courses with, who Jenna Ray McNeil was teaching a course on um, civil rights that I took as an undergraduate. I also had folks like Jacqueline Dowd Hall, who did Southern history, but really had an eye to race and thinking about race in her own work. So, in that regard, I had folks who just taught American history in a way that centered Black folks. And by the time I was, I think, a sophomore, Tara was saying to me, "Oh, you should consider going to graduate school," because I thought about going to law school, and I was gonna do civil rights law. I had it all figured out, and I was first gen in my family. My sister and I were first generation in college, and so I was like, "I'm gonna go to college. We're gonna open these doors, and I'm gonna have a bank account." Law school was gonna be that track, but I was gonna be down with the people doing my activism, not knowing then that, like, that work wasn't gonna be making me a lot of money, but I didn't know better. But, I remember Tara came to me and she said, "You're really good at history. You should consider doing a summer internship at the Martin Luther King Papers Project at Stanford." And I was like, I don't know about that." And at that point, I just thought of professors as kind of teachers. And I was like, I'm not gonna be a teacher. Like, I already made that decision. Because I had gotten a teaching fellowship that I didn't take, and it would have paid for all of my education in North Carolina. It was called Teaching Fellows, and I didn't take it at the time because I was like, I'm not sure I want to be a teacher, and I don't want to have to stay in North Carolina to teach for 4 years to pay it back. So in my mind, I was like, when she was like, you would be a good professor. I was like, no, I'm not gonna be a teacher. I already said, just because how I understood like the academy. You don't know till you know, right?
Right.
So and then I remember on my women's studies side, I actually worked in the women's studies office. That was my work study job. And so I would have to set up for all the events and things like that. And folks like Hazel Carby came through, and Darlene Clark Hine came through. And the head of women's studies was like, "You should meet Darlene Clark Hine, and you should have lunch with her." And so I think I had lunch with Darlene. It was me and Darlene Clark Hine, and I was 19. I was like, "Okay, I'll have, I love what she had to say about Black women. That's great." And she was like, "Your professor said that," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to law school." And she was like, "Well, we need young women like you doing Black women's history, Black women's history, Black women's history." I was like, "I hear you." I'm going to law school. I'm gonna change the world. You know how young people are.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be an activist. I'm gonna do the real, all that nonsense that I have to tell all my students. They talking nonsense now. But anyway, I had all that. I went through that. And so she tried to encourage me. And then, but also because I just didn't know the world
Mhm.
of academia, it didn't really, I didn't really think of it like all these people are trying to encourage me. I was like, what's going on? But they were like trying to get that pipeline going. And so when Tara asked me, I said, "No, I'm not going to apply for the Martin Luther King Papers internship because how do I put it? I got a job." 'Cause I was like, "Are they gonna pay me any money?" And she's like, "I think you get a stipend and, but I was like, "I have to move to California." I had never lived outside of North Carolina. It was like a big deal for me to go to UNC Chapel Hill. And she was like, "Yeah, you have to move to California. You live there." And I was just like, "Yeah, so I have this job because I have been because in North Carolina, UNC at that time, many schools, predominantly white institutions, would have programs for students. They didn't call us first gen, but the black and browns. It was like a transition program, and ours was called Summer Bridge. And I had done Summer Bridge before I came in, and I was like, I got a job being an RA in Summer Bridge, and I'm gonna work that program. And no, Imma stay here, and because I got a room, it's free, I'm getting paid, like, I had it figured out. And she was like, "Okay, okay." Like, I mean, Tara gives me a hard time now, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm not doing that." And then I think my junior year, I was still taking more history classes, and I was like, "I do like this history, I do like it." And, Tara circled back, and she was like, You should apply for this, um, summer internship at the King Papers, and so you can decide if you like doing research."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, I'll apply." And at that point, I had kept in touch with Darlene Clark Hine. She was on the board of it, and so she wrote me a letter, and Tara wrote, and I got the thing, and I went on there, and that's actually where I met, I don't know if you know Erica Armstrong. She was Erica Armstrong then, but she's Erica Armstrong Dunbar now.
Mhm.
Um, and she was an undergrad at Columbia at the time. And so we no, not at Columbia. She was at UPenn because she went to Columbia for graduate school. So we went and did this summer program. And, she was like, just on it. She was already at Ivy League. I didn't know what Ivy League was. I was just like, I'm at, UNC. It's still like that was like, the brass ring for me. And so I just remember getting there. She was like, "You applying to graduate school?" And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just, and she was like, "Well, you know who's here, you know who's here, you know who's here. I'm applying here." Like she kind of gave me an education, schooled me pretty quickly. Um, and then I think that summer I also went to the Berks for the first time, the Berkshire Women's Conference of History. And I think can't remember who was I think the head of my women's studies at that time where I worked was the president, but, like, I think Patricia Williams was the keynote. I saw Evelyn Higginbotham, Nell Painter, all of them were at that conference, and so I was getting a sense of, like, "Oh, okay, I see what this is, I see how it's different," and they were all just, like, politically engaged because it was post Anita Hill.
Mhm.
I was a sophomore, I think, when Anita Hill happened. And I was involved in classes and organizing around it. And so just seeing them kind of rally around, I was like, okay, maybe this is something I could do. And then after that summer at the MLK paper project, I was like, I'm gonna go to graduate school. And I applied. At that point, I don't think trying to think there weren't I mean, if I'm correct, there weren't PhDs in Black studies, um, at that point. I know there was the master's here at Yale when I was applying, um, so I applied to work with, like, just the Black people in the field, so that ranged from Barbara Fields at Columbia, Evelyn Higginbotham at Penn at the time, Darlene Clark Hine at Michigan State, Nell Painter at Princeton. There were, I just applied to wherever, there were Black women in the field at that point. Did I lose you? Must and
No, I'm
so,
here.
um, and then at the end of the day, I had some decisions to make, and I decided to go work with Nell Painter at, um at Princeton. I ain't gonna lie, I initially thought I didn't wanna leave North Carolina. And so I had applied to UNC and I'd applied to Duke, and I thought, "Oh, well, if I get into, Duke or UNC, I'll go to one of those. And I got into UNC, but I didn't get into Duke. And so, and at UNC, everybody said, you gotta leave. You can't
Yeah.
stay here. Because in my mind, I was like, I'm never leaving. I'm coming back. And I went back. And they were like, well, if you even want to come back to teach here, you gotta leave. You
Yeah.
know? And so I was like, okay, what's my choices? So at the end of the day, I went to Princeton. And I knew that I wanted to do Southern history, and Nell Painter was doing Southern history at that point. Kevin Gaines was there, as the African Americanist at the time that I got there, and so it just was like, "This is what I'm gonna do." Um, and, I haven't looked back. You know, being at Yale was the first time that I was in a Black studies, department or program, I should say, that I did my undergraduate in women's studies and history. I had scholars who were deeply invested in African American history, when I was an undergrad. And then in graduate school, I was fortunate enough to have folks who were committed to doing, and Nell was the chair of African American Studies at Princeton for a few years while I was there. So we were already she was already a scholar who was thinking interdisciplinarily.
Mhm.
Um, and so then when I finished my postdoc, I got a postdoc here at Yale in African American Studies and the history department. And so I got more of a kind of interdisciplinary um, kind of training and being in a situation where I had to think and talk with scholars who weren't just historians. And so for me, that has been the real gift of Black studies, particularly when I came back here, because after my postdoc, I was hired as the African Americanist in the history department at Boston College. And then I left Boston College to be, I guess I was the women's historian when I went back to UNC Chapel Hill. And then I left and I came here and I was jointly appointed in American Studies and Black Studies. And they kind of was like, "You do whatever you want." In the sense that, like, they already had the Southern historian, they already had the women's historian, they already had, like, the Black I wasn't hired in that joint line
Mhm.
for FM and history, and that was in part because my husband was coming into the department, and we had just decided we could not be we were in the same department at UNC, but we just were like, "We can't be in the same department, particularly at this institution." And so I was like, "I'm gonna opt out." I knew I had to be joint, and history had led the search, but I was like, "I can't do that." And so I knew I was gonna be in Black studies, and I had to figure out an alternative home, and it came down between women, gender, sexuality studies, and American studies, but I realized that, more of my Americanist colleagues were in American studies than they were in women and gender and sexuality
Mhm.
studies, and I would have that community, there if I was joined like that, and I feel like Black studies saved me in a way at some point because there was a moment where I was thinking about leaving the academy, particularly when I was just in history. I was kind of a little bit, I won't say bored, but yeah, I was probably a little bit bored. And then when the opportunity came here, I was like, "Oh, let me see. I'll do it for a couple more years." But coming into Black studies, I was like, "Oh, I'm not bored, like, I'm learning stuff every day, like,
Uh-huh.
"What? What are they doing in political sci" like, it became more animated, and, so 15 years ago when I came here, a lot of people knew that I was probably thinking about leaving, and I'd started doing psychoanalytic training, creating my off-ramp, but then, once I found my kinda academic home in Black studies at Yale, it just was like, "Oh, I don't have to work so hard in the kind of emotional, and I don't have to, justify why I'm here." or what I
Mhm.
do. I don't have to explain it. Like, that's not the starting point, right? The starting point is, "Oh my god, have you thought about this? Oh my god, let's like, oh, you should definitely talk to so and so in sociology," right? Versus, and I just had a bigger intellectual community, and an intellect and to be in a department, Imma say this, that's like Black, not just intellectually, but just like, you know, it's like, I don't have to say nothing right now. Like, we've been talking, and you'd be like, yeah, that's yeah, what she said." Versus like, "Okay, we gonna tag team to make sure that they heard what we said, so if they skip over me, we're not amplifying," right?
Mhm.
That, like so for me, the move to, like, Black studies made it possible for me to say, "Okay, Imma stay. Imma stay," and because I can learn, and it's been exciting for me. That's a long answer to that question.
No, it was great though. I always find it fascinating, people's
Sorry.
paths to the academy, but specifically to Black studies
Mm,
because it's so varied, like,
yeah.
nobody took the same path,
Mhm,
and so many of the people who are doing Black studies scholarship
mhm,
did not get, like, formal degrees in Black
mhm,
studies,
right,
um, so I find it very fascinating, and I also think it's really interesting how it starts like, it's for different people at different points, right? Some
mhm,
people, it was, my mama read me the autobiography of Malcolm X,
yeah,
and some people, it was, I took this class, I had this
yeah,
professor,
right,
and then others, it was like, I mean, I I just stumbled upon it one day,
right, yeah,
like,
yeah,
I think it's really helpful to hear all the
mhm,
different ways to be able to do this work, especially because it is multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary,
yeah,
and there isn't a set path you have to walk to do it.
right, and it just means that, like, it's what makes the field exciting and the
Mhm,
community exciting because you don't feel like you're having the same conversation over and over and over again, right? And even if you are, you're having it from so many different disciplinary and methodological places and
mhm.
from people coming at it from all different kinds of walks of life and from different kinds of training. And that's not to say like historians aren't diverse or interesting intellectually, but it is a more conservative discipline,
Yeah.
right? And you get locked in, right? It's like, oh, you are a civil rights historian. That's what you're gonna do forever until the end of time because you've been trained in 20th century, right? Versus like if you're in Black studies and you learn methods and you learn theory, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. That's what I
Yeah.
always say to people. Like you got the theoretical and methodological chops to move across time and space and even disciplines, right? Or at least to borrow from them. So yeah, that diversity of how we got there actually informs the kind of intellectual capaciousness and vibrancy of the field, I think.
Absolutely. So, you kind of touched on this a little bit, um, but I wanna ask if you wanna say more about how you situate yourself disciplinarily now that
Mhm.
you are in a Black studies department, um, being trained in history, but being trained by historians who did Black studies.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question because 'cause I'm often like, the context, 'cause a historian,
Mhm,
when I say that, it matters. So that, like, when I'm teaching I'm teaching a graduate course that's cross-listed with Black studies, American studies, history, and, say, women, gender, and sexuality studies. I'm doing readings in African American women's history. I'm gonna get students across the
mhm.
disciplines, but I roll in, I'm like, "I'm a historian." And I just kinda say it matter of fact. So, like, let me be clear. You may be coming from this from interdisciplinary programs, you may be coming from here and here and here, but, today I'm teaching you the disciplinary tools and methods of historians, right? So don't be mad at me if we ain't reading. I ain't gonna say what, but like y'all reading historians today. You know, um, because I want you to understand. And I might match. Sometimes I'll match some stuff from other disciplines, but I really feel like it's important for them to learn what I do, how I do it, how I was trained. And then that for some of them, they are historians because they tend to be, if a portion of the class will be my students who are in FM and history.
Mm.
Right, because at Yale, it's joint. You have to be in Black studies and a discipline. Right, but I'm gonna have a lot of kids who are in, the English department or political science or even divinity school or the music department, right? And so I really have to teach, one, for my people who are getting that degree in history, but I'm also like, "This is gonna make you a better interdisciplinary scholar because you're in religion, but you're learning from a historian," right?
Mhm.
Um, so I really sort of lock down when it's a certain course 'cause we're in the archives every other week, and they're having to read documents. They're reading up against the secondary literature. If it's a course that, like, I teach this semester, I'm teaching interdisciplinary approaches to Black studies, and that's for the juniors and the majors, and I can't roll in and be like, "I'm a historian. That's what y'all gonna learn." You know? So the context matters. So and now we're reading across the discipline, right? Across the disciplines, right? Um, I'm introducing them to to all of my colleagues' scholarship across the disciplines. And so that they can then understand, well, what's the method? What's the theory? What are they doing? Where's their overlap? Where do you see that like my work on lynching overlaps with Jacqueline Goldsby's work on, the specter of lynching, what she wrote about in literaries, and how does my work overlap with Erica Edwards and Tara? So trying to get them to see that we're in different fields, but we're in conversation, but we read the same sources very differently. And what are the stakes of doing that? So yeah, so I kinda navigated a couple of ways. My professional life is mostly, um, outside Yale and, like, with professional organizations. I tend to move through the history profession, because that's just where my career started,
Mm.
as a historian. So I'm mostly active in like the OAH or the Southern Historical Association or the Southern Association of Women's History, or the American History Association. I've probably been to American Studies once or twice. I'll do ABWA, like the Association of Black Women's Historians, but I'm mostly moving in that world, right? Um, and trying to stay up on the literature in my field. But at the undergraduate level, I tend to teach more interdisciplinary. The graduate really kind of locked down in my discipline. I know there was a second part to that question, maybe, that I didn't answer?
No, you covered it.
Okay,
You got it, you
okay.
got it. Um, so what you especially talking about how the context, like which students you're teaching, what level, what classes, how that, influences the way that you situate yourself. I do want to follow up on that, but I want to pause and talk about doing the type of history that you do for a minute.
Mhm,
Um, Earlier you mentioned how, you were a little bored with history before, but that it also, like, you having to justify the importance of the research that you're doing, which is unfortunately such a common experience across Black women historians in particular. Um, but I know that, like, the work that you do is also very heavy, right? Like,
right,
talking about lynching, talking about rape, like, that's super, super heavy, and I wanted to ask how what are the practices that are involved in doing that kind of work and still being able to maintain your peace?
right. This is a question that I've, gotten from day one, right? And, And I can say that, like, my answers changed over time if you look at different interviews, because of course, context matters. I remember as a graduate student, when I decided to work on the topic, and it was specifically, narrow at the time. I was mostly looking specifically at Black women victims of lynching at the time when I started it, and I remember people like, "You're not gonna find anything. It's gonna be hard to find anything. It's a needle in a haystack." And I was really committed to like, "I'm gonna find something," and because I know we left a record. We just got it. And maybe it's in plain sight. We just haven't been paying attention to it.
Mhm.
So that like in those in that graduate student phase, like, you know, I know that, like, I had a friend, my friend Cheryl Hicks, and she works on Black women's history. She was a year ahead of me, and she was working on Black women in incarceration. And, um, and I remember we would talk, and I would be like, "Oh my god, I found another case." But I would say it with, like, not like, "Oh my god, I found another case." No, like, I would be like, "Oh my god, I got some evidence," right? Like, I was so happy to, like, thought like, I knew it, but, like, I'm just excited that I found a case, right? Um, and so that first like, just doing the research in those initial stages was exciting and exhilarating because I was like, "I'm gonna be able to tell this history, like, that, like, it's we ain't what happened to Anita Hill ain't gonna happen again, right? That we're gonna have the story that, like, Clarence Thomas can't be just the only one talking about lynching, that we can talk about the ways in which Black women were victims of racial, terror and sexual violence." So, in those early years, I was just excited, and I felt like, "Oh, I'm doing the work. This is what I have been called to do." I didn't go to law school, but, and I'm not, like, out there in, at rape crisis centers, but I am doing the work so that political arguments can be made. So early on, like, I think when I wrote the dissertation, I was just, like, in it. Um, I think as time passed and I had to think about how was I gonna write Southern Horrors, and I needed it not to just be case studies, but, like, how do I write this as a narrative? How do I understand like, how do I wanted to kind of bring in, um, biography in the sense that, like, okay, how do I really understand white women if I'm not, like, doing a deep dive on a white woman? And how do I understand what's going on with Black women if I don't do a deep dive? And so going back to rewrite the dissertation with like, okay, Ida B. Wells is my inflection point here was much harder to kind of have to imagine people's interior lives, their day-to-day lives, and not just thinking about a case so
Mhm.
that I could make the argument, but like, how do I tell this story? How do I narrate it? Um, and at some point, people would ask me the question, and I was like, well, if Ida B. Wells can live through it, I can write about it. I can walk into the archive and read about it. I can bear witness, right? And bearing witness is very different um, than having to live through something,
Yeah.
right? And bearing witness to the past, right? So that we can imagine a different kind of future is, is not something that I struggle with. It's something that I feel like that is my call to action. That is my purpose. Um, and so, I just was meeting with a student, and part of the work that I do often means that because I work on these questions, I'm mentoring and talking to young students who are constantly dealing with sexual trauma and sexual assault because they feel like, oh, this is a safe space. I had a student who she come to me last year and she'd taken my civil rights and women's lib course where we talk about like how women have organized around these issues. She was going through something and she was trying to decide if she was going to pursue legal things, like legal consequences. And, as a feminist, there's always like we like, well, you gotta speak out, you gotta do your part, you gotta like make sure it don't happen to nobody else. And I was like, you gotta take care of you. Like,
Yeah.
what is essential to your survival that I can tell you that like I can sit in the archive and read this stuff, that I can do this work, that like wherever what I have in the way of resilience, that I'm able to mobilize it so that I can do this work, right? I said, but that is not like something I don't think of resilience as something you learn or you acquire. It's like it's just how you're made, right? And so for some people, they can't sit in the archive and read this stuff. That like it would be soul destroying, right? But there are some of us who can do it and we should do it, right? There are some of us who can, bring that legal case, right? And some of us be like, I'm good. Like, he gonna burn in hell, but I'm good, right? Like, I don't need him to be in jail for the next decade, or I don't need to go through this and him then not be in jail, like whatever. I said to her, you have to figure out. There's no answer. You have to figure out what you can do and what you can live with. And I said, and I think our assumption as Black women, as feminists, who see ourselves as, I don't want to say superwomen, but like, I ain't gonna take no shit. That
Mhm.
I first it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna let this go. And that that in her mind, she's like, I want him to suffer. And I said, okay, well, you could think of vengeance is real. Like, and you can have that and you can want that, but can you live with that? That like you're gonna have to turn over your life to 2 years or 3 years. The rest of your undergraduate career is gonna be really focused on this. And that I can respect that decision. Can you live with it? Like, or you might say, I'm good. Maybe his frontal lobe gonna develop and he ain't gonna hurt nobody else. I said, but that's on him. It's not on you to make sure he don't hurt nobody else.
Right.
And so I said to her, like, in this conversation today, she came back to me. It's been a year, and she said, I decided not to do nothing. I took what you said. I said, well, what'd I say? She said, you told me I could let it go. I said, yeah, if you wanted to. And she said, "I let it go." I'm like, "I'm so much happier, and I'm doing all the things. I'm writing this play, and I'm directing this play that's about sexual assault, blah blah blah." And like, that's how I'm going to change the culture. Like, have people think about these things, right? And so it's very similar to like, what can you live with? I had a graduate student who works on Black women in prisons. She's got a job now, but I remember she was like, I think I'm gonna do this project on these Black women who organized in California for this Black man who was incarcerated. I'm gonna do the research paper. She did the research paper. She came back. She was like, oh, I think he might have been a serial rapist too. And she was like, well, I don't know. She's like, can I write about the Black women organized? Like, am I gonna have to deal with this part? And I was like, well, yeah, you're gonna have to deal with it. And then I was like, but you also gonna have to decide if you can live with it for a decade.
Yeah.
Right? That like, is this the story that you want to live with for a decade? Because either you got the stomach for it or you don't. And she was like, okay. And then she goes, I don't got the stomach for it. And she moved on, right? And so, but somebody might be able to write that project, right? And it's not because they're better, it's just their stomach, can tolerate it. And so in that regard, I can do it. I don't got no magic potion. I can be undone by it at times, but I also know that like my sort of moment is a moment, right? And it might be that I turn to work on other things and then I come back to it, and it may be slower work than I would like to like, slower than I would like, but everybody's just slower than what they would like,
That's true.
whether it's hard or not, right? Um, so yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I
Mhm.
want to be mindful of time. So, I'll quickly ask, is there anything you want to add about your work as a teacher, particularly when you are approaching Black Studies courses?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I can speak to that at 2 levels. I love undergraduate teaching. As a Black studies professor, I love being, it's gonna sound crazy, but I love being in the classroom that is the like, there's only a few classes where the Black kids are the majority
Yeah.
when I'm teaching at a predominantly white institution. And they tend to be like this semester I'm teaching a class. They are all Black, right? And I'm just like, when I come in there, I'm just like, oh my God, y'all just don't understand. Y'all just don't understand. Like I could talk, so get everything. Like, so that like I love that. I love that. I don't get it often, but there is a kind of I'm only gonna get that as a Black studies professor teaching
Mhm.
Black studies major, and that's not to say that this I have taught this junior seminar, I have taught the senior seminar. We often have white kids in our major. We have Latino kids in our major. We got the rainbow, but right now, that rainbow is Black, and that means something, and I love that. It's just like an anomaly. But also, I'd love like, when I teach my big lecture course, the long civil rights movement. I might have out of 100 kids, maybe 10 Black kids. And I'm not gonna say that they're all like, how we wanna talk about it, Black people from descendants of enslaved.
Right.
They're gonna be from the diaspora, whatever. And so I love being in that space with Black kids as the professor because it is very rare that they get the opportunity to have a Black person in front of the room. And it don't matter what the class is, they know that I'm going to be like, okay, y'all, I'm going to give a lecture. I'm like, now this is what Black excellence looks like. And I can see them like, that whenever I teach it, oftentimes when I took a class on, and they talked about slavery, we all know that initial feeling when you're in a
Mhm.
predominantly white space and the stuff about Black people comes up and you like, oh, don't look at me. And you feel like, you learn to be proud of your history and your people and their resilience. But you learn it because you eventually get people who teach it to you in a way that
Yeah.
makes you proud, right? Not ashamed or like you wanna crawl under the desk. And most of us in high school or middle whenever anybody says something about Black people, was like, "Oh, Lord, you dreading it."
Mhm.
Right? So, I really think about, like, "Oh, when my Black kids come, they gonna be, like, ready for me to say something about Black people because I'm gonna say it in a way that they just gonna be like, "Mhm, mhm." Like, so that is and nobody can tell me I can't do it because I'm in Black studies. This is my field. Like, this is why we here.
Yep.
We are here we came out of a moment where people were like, Black Lives Matter, Black Pride matters, Black History matters. And we make this place better, right? So anytime I teach anything, I know they be like, "Oh Lord, she's saying all the things, right? They know democracy without Black people, and y'all, this birthright citizenship." I like Latino people. Come on now. Oh, Black people, Reconstruction. Y'all got public schools. You got mental health. Like all that came out of Reconstruction when Black people imagined what democracy could look like. So I'm gonna tell you, yeah, they need to thank us. So in my classes, and when I do civil rights, the Black kids be like, I'm so glad to be in this class, right? So that is what Black Studies does for me in a way that, like, just I won't say I had to it's what do we call it? We need a word. What is it when black white people like the audacity, the caucasity? What's the word? I don't know.
Yeah,
There's some
caucasity.
expression. Yeah, I'm like, I got the blackdacity. I don't know what it is, but like, some white people gonna be leaving like the blackdacity or that, But I'm like, you in Black Studies, you in this class. It's in the title. It's in the like.
Oh.
Don't come up in here asking me about no white like. So, but in a way that I just could not do that or I didn't have that, audacity when I was in my discipline, right? Um, but I had a model from day one, right? When Tara taught that class to me, which was American history, and I was like, oh, I didn't think of it as Black history. I was like, oh, she's flipped the script here for us. And I sat in that class feeling proud. And it was a class that was majority, white.
Mhm.
And she did that for me, whether she was conscious of it or not. And I have been able to kind of channel that as um, a faculty member in Black Studies at Yale, where a lot of Black kids come in with their um, imposter syndrome. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying that that's not everywhere because it's everywhere. Um, but I can speak to that a bit. At the graduate level, um, I feel like I had, if I'm honest, and I don't know how, and this is probably because of my own, like, how I came to, the academy, and how I understood it. I always thought, "Oh, I'm gonna do this because I wanna teach undergraduates." Like, it just was, like, this made such a huge difference for me. These professors changed the way that I saw the world, how I moved through the world, how I thought about myself, and that, like, I wanna have that impact on undergrads.
Mm.
And I didn't necessarily like, I joke, I was like, I could have done, speech communication, I could have been in performance studies, I could have been a literary scholar, like, history was the path that encouraged me to go this route, but I didn't necessarily think, "Oh, I'm gonna go to graduate school. I'm gonna go and be an academic and train graduate students." Like, it just was not I mean, I don't know. Maybe graduate students think that now. I don't know. But for me, it was just like, oh, I want to teach undergraduates. And where they are at this particular time in their life, and you can like have an influence. And that history for me is going to be the influence to get them to go out and do something in the world. And I always say my classes are call to action. So ending up at, like, a research institution ending up at these research institutions, like, I always thought, "I'm be at a liberal arts college," or I'll be at a state university, I'll be back at UNC, and I'm gonna be teaching little me's. I don't know. So but you get in it and you're like, "Oh," once you're a graduate student, you realize, "Oh, that's the heavy lift for faculty." But also as a graduate student, you gonna suck the soul out of them people on your committee. You need so much. And I say that as somebody who's like, I need. Come on, y'all. And they gave. And that is the thing. They gave to me. And because they understood the project. And, but it also meant because I didn't come, even as an undergraduate, because I didn't understand that world so well, I didn't have a problem asking for what I need because I was like, "They teachers, that's what they get paid for. What y'all talk about?" They're like, "Oh, she gonna work with you? You just" I'm like, "What you mean she gonna work with me? Like, that's the job, right? Like, what they here for if they're not here for this, right?" But then as a faculty member, you're like, "Oh, Lord, I'm here, but I don't know. I ain't got all that energy." So, with the graduate students, I had to I had to, like, be like, "Okay, I gotta pay it forward." Like, I'm literally that's how I like people did right by me, I'm gonna do right by people. But this ain't what I signed up for. Like, in a sense, like, I feel like my people trained me, and I went down the history path and became a professor because I understood it as an activist move in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly I think about, like, I didn't become a professor so that I could create historians. That's gonna sound so bad. And so I want, like, and I often say this with the major, I don't need you to major in Black Studies, but you need to take some classes. Take that with you wherever you're going. Like, Black Studies is gonna serve you out in the world no matter what you do. So to then be like, oh, my job is to train historians, it felt so narrow, right? But I also felt I had an obligation and a responsibility. Um, and so I think a lot of my energy and time has been about my graduate students. Um, and I say that as somebody who's like, my advisor was amazing. The people who supported me and mentored me, whether they were not my advisor, whether they were on my committee, it just that bench is really deep. And I know I wouldn't be here without those folks, but I also know that, and I have learned over time that that is not the norm. That, like, many of us are lucky to find one person, maybe two, who really are gonna roll with us through the, rejections, the, like, training you, all of the things. Like, I had to be trained, and I think a lot of times we forget that people have to be trained,
Yeah.
and to train them is work, it's labor.
Yeah.
And so I probably have, and undergraduates, they go. Shoot, you got rah, rah, yay, good luck out there. You did the letters, they in law school. You might not see them again. You ain't gonna lose no sleep thinking,
Right.
they get in law school? Did they graduate from law school? Did they get a job? They gone. Them graduate students, that's life. I mean, my people have been there for me for life. From like, I'm been 30 years in. They still gotta write me some letters of recommendation. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So with the graduate students, it for me, it was not the work I signed up for, but it is the work that I have been the most committed to in my um in this work. So I think I have about 15 graduate students that I have chaired their committees. They are out there. They have jobs. I can sleep at night. I got one more that don't have a job yet, but they about to defend. They have postdocs. They have tenure track jobs, or they have chosen an alternate path.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm tired. I have pulled back in the last few years on the graduate training. That's not to say I'm not on people's committees. There's like this window because I've stepped into the role of head of college
Mhm.
at Yale, which is that I run one of the 14 residential colleges here. That is administrative work that's really oriented and focused on undergraduate education. And it's really the work that I think I had imagined I would be doing as a professor. Um, and I get to do it as a Black Studies professor now on this campus. And so yeah, I will continue to probably train graduate students, but at smaller and smaller numbers, because the job market is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, that, like, it is a huge responsibility, and it's not one that I take lightly. And yeah, and the undergraduates, I can sleep at night a little bit better when I'm just advising a senior essay and don't gotta get a job based on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they do in a sense, like,
Yeah, but it's not.
they
It's
don't.
not the same. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not the same.
So
I
I love teaching. I love teaching. And I have no regrets about the teaching. It's just a huge responsibility.
Yeah. Thank you. I know you have got to run, but
Yes.
is there anything you would like to add to
For
close out?
yes, I would. I would like to say thank you, for doing this series, for doing this work. I know that you are busy, your time is valuable, and these podcasts are valuable. I'm excited every time one pops in I'm on some list, so they pop into my, inbox, and I've loved seeing old friends, and I've loved seeing the new scholars in the field. It reminds me of why I came to Black studies, the diversity,
Mhm.
and the brilliance and the importance of our work. So thank you for doing this for us, by us, as they say.
Well, thank you for being here. It is only possible because wonderful people like you agree to come and have these conversations. So, thank you so much for your time and for the work you do in general
Thank
in Black women's history and Black studies.
thank you. Thank you. Take care, Ashley.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.